Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished entrepreneur and an accomplished professional from Kalimpong, India, Mr. Dipyaman Sanyal, PhD. Deep, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ashutosh.
Deep is the Chief Executive Officer of dōnō Consulting. And I'm assuming dōnō means both, helping clients take better decisions with data. Co-founder and CEO of PropMath. He's an adjunct faculty of the Northwestern University. And given the kind of track record he's had, he's understandably been awarded, recognized, and felicitated several times. So, Deep, before we talk about dōnō Consulting, tell me about your own amazing journey and what took you to such a beautiful place like Kalimpong up in the hills to do all your work from.
Thanks, Ashutosh. After my master's at Jadavpur University, I went to the University of Texas at Dallas, dropped out of my PhD program, moved to New York, worked in Wall Street, came back to India, stayed 9 years in Delhi, but very often go walking and hiking in mountains. In Delhi, it's close by, so
yeah.
It's easy. And then about 5 years, a little over 5 years back, we moved to Kumaon, in a small village there, spent 3 years because, I don't know, multiple reasons, but just to just be out of the city, I guess, and spent a couple of years in a village in Coorg. 6 months back, moved here. So, yeah. Amazing. From New York to Kalimpong, fairly different places.
You're actually living a life that a lot of people would probably dream of.
I hear that a lot.
I'm sure. So Deep, let's talk about dōnō Consulting, which is an organization you set up to help clients take better decisions with data. Tell me about dōnō Consulting and the kind of work you do.
So we started dōnō in 2013. We registered in 2013. And we have been working with a variety of clients, from private equity funds to skilling organizations, government agencies, to insurance companies, a variety of folks. The idea behind setting it up was that I've had 2 or 3 areas where I've worked extensively, and I thought that why not build an organization where we can do that. We will be small, we will be nimble. We will ensure that we will be intellectually very strong, not in size, but intellectually. And help, the whole data movement was starting to happen. People were getting interested, but there was not enough going on. There were some larger organizations which were there, but their focus was not, their focus was more services as opposed to pure play consulting. So I think that gave me a niche as well. And the other personal reason was when I moved out from my last organization, the roles that I was getting offered were to manage 100 people, 200 people, set up, I never saw myself as a people manager managing a few hundred people. So I thought, personally speaking, it made a lot more sense to have something small, but work in multiple areas of interest for me. Data being a big one. Yeah.
So tell me, what are some of the key challenges some of your clients face in leveraging data for decision making, and how do you at dōnō address these challenges?
The biggest challenge, I think, to begin with, there are a couple of areas which are definite pain points. Right? I think now with the rise of automated ML and things like that, a lot of the traditional data science work has become automated or partially automated. But 2 key areas, I think, big challenges. One is, of course, the data itself. Requires a lot of data engineering, feature engineering, so on and so forth. And data sits in different silos. Databases don't speak to each other, and so on. That's the technical part of the challenge, largely technological part of the challenge. I think the other part of the challenge, which I personally find more interesting, is what problems to solve and how. I think that's one thing that I keep saying, that you can automate a lot of things, but generative AI still can't do that for you. So,
Right.
that's what keeps me excited. And because we work across domains, we get so many different or unique kinds of challenges from our clients. I think that's our forte, if you will. Look at a problem or look at an organization, figure out problem areas, and going out there and solving it, which makes us, I think, a very focused consulting firm to a services firm.
Well said. And while the whole corporate world is talking a lot about data-driven decision making, there are still a lot of misconceptions. And a lot of good people say that we need to use our gut, we need to use our prior experience, et cetera, et cetera. What are some common misconceptions you have faced?
Wow, that's a great question. I think I keep saying that as you move up the corporate ladder, there's a negative correlation between the amount of intellectual power that you have to use on a day-to-day basis, right? If you're the CEO of a large organization, you have to take a lot of decisions with your gut, and you learn to trust it, and you learn to move against the market. Think about somebody who started a large firm, right? If they had listened to conventional wisdom, they wouldn't have succeeded. 90% of firms fail. So if I had to do data-driven decision making, or you had to do data-driven decision making, you would have never started your organization. So I think that's where the resistance comes. That, hey, I know what's right. I've started this company, made it this big, or I'm a CEO. I've seen the success. Why should I not trust my gut? I think that's the key.
Correct.
That's one of the key areas where we face, or we have to answer a lot of questions. And we usually go back to the work of Daniel Kahneman and say that there are lots of biases that we have.
Right.
Heuristics, and they don't always work very well.
And for my viewers and listeners, can you give me an example of how, without taking names of companies or individuals, of course, can you give me an example of how data has helped to improve decision making for one of your clients?
Well, we have had, of course, multiple interesting places where we have implemented these. We did a fair bit of work at one point with I'll give you two examples. One was more very technical, right? I mean, data science, ML, AI, and so on. And one was more just data centric, right? As opposed to using models for data. Whenever we think of data or analytics, we think of, it has to have a lot of statistical machine learning, but I don't think that's always necessary.
Right.
So we worked with a very large travel agency based out of Europe, and they would get these hundreds of leads on their webpage with certain very few parameters. Somebody would say, hey, I would love to travel to India, love to go with 5 of my friends. Love to, this is how much I'm willing to spend, and I'd love to go in December because it's good. Right? And with this little information, right, they wanted to figure out that which are the leads that are worth pursuing. Because if you get 1,000 leads, only so much. And a similar problem at scale was when we worked with one of the largest job portals who also had a learning problem. So they would call up the folks who are looking for jobs and offer them, hey, why don't you do this course? Right? And again, they had 300, 400,000 people signing in every day.
Right.
They couldn't call all of them.
Wow.
Now, who do you call and why? And in both of these cases, I think the power of analyzing data sensibly, smartly, the numbers that we received at the end of it, the success metrics, were absolutely incredible. I mean, sometimes even beyond what I had expected.
Absolutely fascinating. And my next question is that how do you balance the need for cutting edge technology with the practical constraints of implementation in client projects?
Yeah, that's a big one. We were just pitching for something the other day, and when we mentioned that it's gonna at least cost you $3,000 a month for just the cloud machine, a GPU machine for implementing generative AI, and creating a Q&A session, Q&A system. The client was like, "What? $3,000 a month just for one machine?" Right? And I think that's where part of the consultative part comes in. I keep saying that I wear two hats. One is a consulting hat where consultants try to make everything more complex. And one is the faculty hat where I try to make everything simpler. I think hopefully at least it cross-pollinates. So part of my job, I think, is to talk to clients and help them realize whether there is an ROI or not. Not everybody needs generative AI. I mean, I'll go out and say it out loud. Right. Not every organization needs cutting edge models. Correct. They might have a kind of data which doesn't require. Yeah. So don't use it. Don't waste your money.
Correct.
Or pilot it. Look for the ROI.
Well said. And Deep, are there any kinds of ethical considerations that may arise when implementing AI-based decision-making systems?
Oh, absolutely. I think I think we don't talk about it enough. The industry doesn't talk about it enough. If you look at a lot of the AI-based systems, decision-making systems, a lot of the work that's going on, there has been, and I've written about it before, there have been flagrant violation of copyright laws. And if somebody says otherwise, they're misstating the truth. But yes, I think, but the challenge though is, we also don't want to be like Europe, where the regulation comes first and the innovation becomes secondary.
Right.
Even the recent regulations from the United States, it mentions how many petaflops it has to be for a model to be regulated. I mean, these are completely arbitrary. It's a broader philosophical question which we have to answer. But I think the challenge with technology, it's like the power of the atom. Once it's split, it's split. And once you have some of these models, maybe folks who favor open source might be right. But, opening it up is probably better than having people steal your secrets and having it in silos in some places.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's such a big debate going on about open AI and whether we need to commercialize it or not commercialize it. But moving on, what advice would you give to organizations looking to start their journey towards becoming more data-driven? And here I want to talk about some of the old traditional businesses that exist. And you did a few minutes back said not everyone needs generative.
Yeah. I think, for all businesses, it has to be two things. One is it has to be ROI driven. 80% of data projects do not see the light of day after the pilot.
Okay.
Because there is a lack of trust, there is lack of confidence, there is not enough ROI. The challenge with data projects also is that it requires an enormous amount of pre-work to get to a place where it starts producing that out.
Right.
So the key will be, one is get a trusted partner and have the patience, because unless you go through the data engineering journey and all of that, it's going to be a little bit of a burn, right? Slow burn. And you have to sit through it. And which is never fun for a CEO who's got quarterly results to declare.
Right.
Yeah. Train or upskill internally to get the buy-ins across levels. Organizations, and we have, of course, been in the skilling business as well, along with partners. Organizations which have scaled up from bottom layer to the CXO layers. There, the data journey becomes much more simple because people realize that what that journey looks like. They're not in for a surprise.
Right.
And I think those are the big key pieces. Right. Look at your ROI, have the patience, and train your people, because you can get like, a data science consulting company. You can get a small data science team even. Unless the rest of the organization is bought into that it can bring value, you're going to shut it down for 6 months. I can promise you that.
Absolutely. And this comment you just made, that unless the whole team has bought into it, that's an interesting segue to my next question. How do you foster a culture of data-driven decision-making within organizations, especially those where there is resistance to change?
I just started dōnō. At the same time started teaching because that was my backup plan, if you will, that if the company doesn't do well, maybe I can teach. And then it took a life of its own, of course.
Yeah.
One of the first corporate training programs I did was with a public sector unit. I was probably 32 years old, and room full of very senior folks for a company which is effectively the engineers to the government of India. It's decision makers who sign checks for hundreds of crores, right? Or sign off on infrastructure projects for thousands of crores for the government. And I was supposed to teach them decision making. And I thought it was a joke, right? But when I went in, I decided that let's not talk about what data can do for you, but let's talk about human fallibility. There are certain things we do very well. And if you look at the works of Gerd Gigerenzer, he tells us that intuition is intelligence. Right? And intuition can be as good in many cases as data-driven decision making.
Right.
He was at loggerheads with Daniel Kahneman, who said heuristic sleep biases. Right. And I understand that, but we should also realize that there are certain areas where we make terrible decisions because we try to take decisions very quickly because it otherwise has a lot of cognitive load. Right? We stereotype. As human beings, we tend to stereotype. We take small amounts of data and project it to a large population.
Right.
This is standard behavior. And don't get me wrong, this is what allowed us to survive the ice ages. Right. You didn't wait for data. Something moved in the hedges, you just ran. You didn't wait to see if it was a saber-toothed tiger or what. You run.
Correct. Correct.
But if that's how we take corporate decisions in the 21st century, where we just use these very quick decision-making processes, we're going to fail most of it.
But yeah, sorry, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
No, that's how we start the discussion.
And so I love this example that you've given of the saber-toothed tiger. In the work that you do, have you encountered the fact that some of the younger managers who come and tell senior managers, you're asking me to go in this direction, but data proves otherwise?
Often, yes.
Okay.
We have seen that once too often, and that's also a unique challenge, I think, for more hierarchical cultures like ours, right? Where questioning somebody older to you or senior to you is looked down upon. Again, I know it's not always been the case, and I know that it's not everywhere, but that's the usual, right? That's common practice. And that's one reason, I think that's one area where we need to work as a culture, as a country, as and not just India. I mean, I'm talking broader Southeast Asia, where we should be willing be questioned by even our interns,
right?
If they have numbers supporting them.
Correct.
And dōnō, we try to do that. We really try to do. I think we always succeed, but that's definitely a part of the way we have designed the organization, that everybody has the right to question somebody else's wisdom.
Well said. So Deep, I have time for two more questions.
Sure.
My next question is, what are some of the emerging trends in data science and AI that you believe will have a significant impact in the future, or something that you are excited about?
Yeah, I mean, of course, everyone's talking of generative AI, so I won't talk about it. What's the point? But there are two or three other aspects of AI ML that I want to talk about. One is is a small movement that's becoming bigger is causal inferencing. If you think of all our traditional models, machine learning models, statistical models, they were all correlational models. Right? They're association rules. That X is related to Y. Even your regression, whatever models that we see. But none of them actually tell us about causation.
Right.
They don't say that A causes B. The maximum it can say is that A happens before B. But then the rooster crows every morning before the sun rises.
Right.
There's no causation. It happens before, right? So your model often is very, very flawed because it doesn't look at causation. And Judea Pearl and his co-authors over the past 30 years, I think, have done an amazing job integrating causal models into machine learning, building it up. We do some work in that, and I think that's going to be huge and very, very important in the near future. I think explainable AI is going to be incredibly important because we can't think of ethics without having the power to explain a model.
Correct.
And so the XAI movement is growing, is becoming bigger, and I think it's just going to go bigger and bigger from now on. So these are two areas, and there are multiple others, but
amazing.
These are two, I think, that just stand out.
Amazing. Thank you. And my last question to you, Deep, and I come back to all the work that you are doing at dōnō. What are some lessons you have learned from your past projects that have shaped your approach to helping your clients make better decisions?
Yeah, I think two things from an organizational standpoint, a personal standpoint. One is, of course, from an organizational standpoint, and it took a little time for me to realize we need more partners, right? Like really senior folks who can help us and who can bring their vision. We made those changes very, very recently, like getting senior partner level folks. And the other thing, I think, and that in a way I got lucky in manner because I studied economics and econometrics and things like that, and then moved to quantitative finance, which has its own set of models. Got very interested in behavioral psychology and behavioral economics and finance, which has its own set of models, and then data science, then machine learning, then AI. Is that if you ask about models, people only talk about statistics and machine learning and AI, neural networks, deep learning. Right? Only three paradigms. But if you think about models, there are models in physics which are used for the whole area of econophysics. There are agent-based models from complex systems. There are models in biostatistics, which are non-traditional or non-parametric statistical models. There are models from epidemiology, which are definitely which help us predict what how COVID or whatever is going to spread.
Yeah.
But if you talk to data scientists, anybody, most folks in the industry, they'll only talk about statistics, ML, DL. I think that's a shame. And at dōnō, we are very, very hard at work to get our clients to understand that that's not where it ends.
Right.
Just because somebody won the beauty contest, right? I mean that they are the only ones, and these are very powerful to a machine learning neural. It's very, very powerful. But there are a lot of things that these models cannot answer at all. They're not fit for it. Where a model from physics of phase transition can explain boiling water, right? But a linear regression cannot, because it doesn't boil linearly. You can't 20% boil a water. You have to go to 100 degrees, and then it starts boiling.
Correct.
So there's a phase transition that happens. So unless you have a phase transition model, you'll never be able to understand tipping points.
Absolutely.
So these are interesting things I think we learned and we try to implement.
Very well said. And on that note, Deep, I just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me about your own incredible journey. I'm one more person who's going to join the bandwagon and say how lucky you are to have taken the final decision to move to such a nice place, which is absolutely clean and away from all pollution. Thank you for speaking to me about dōnō Consulting, about data-driven decision-making. I've also personally always been an advocate of using data, but I'm much, much older than you are, and your understanding of data and how to utilize it is so critical. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thanks for having me over. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.